Hello and welcome to the Reykjavík Newsdesk. I'm Andie Sophia Fontaine, and these are the week's top stories in Iceland. If you like the content that you see here, be sure and like and subscribe. And if you really like the content that you see here, check out the Patreon link in the description below to see what kind of goodies you can get just by kicking a little extra coin our way. But now, the week's top stories. There is an opioid crisis in Iceland, but the main point of contention is what to do about it. Valgerður Runasdóttir, the chief of medicine at the rehab center Vogur, says that 10 of their clients have died of opioid overdose since the beginning of the year. She adds that about 2 people each day are checking themselves into Vogur on account of opioid addiction, and she has called upon the government to do something about the matter. There have, in fact, been 35 opioid-related deaths in Iceland this year alone, and Independence Party MP Diljá Mist Einarsdóttir has echoed the sentiments from Vogur, calling upon the government to do something. So what is going to be done? Well, Minister of Health Willem Thor Thorsson has talked about making rehabs and hospitals more accessible to addicts. He's also talked about making naloxone, which is a fast-acting nasal spray that can prevent an overdose or reverse an overdose, accessible over the counter in pharmacies. What will not be on the table is the decriminalization of drugs. Now, this comes as a surprise because this very same minister in March 2022 was talking about he was going to submit a bill that would decriminalize certain types of drugs and certain amounts for certain purposes and what have you, but that never came to pass. Now that's completely off the table. The move is unusual because at the time that the bill was being introduced, most Icelanders polled at the time showed support for the bill. The bill also received the backing of the director of prisons. In the meantime, if you live in Iceland, check out the description for a link to a group called Frú Ragnheiður. They are a harm reduction group under the auspices of the Red Cross, and they're offering free naloxone to anyone who wants it. You should also check out the page just to learn more about them and see how you can help. Some tragic news to report as 4 youths aged 17 to 19 participated in the fatal stabbing of a Polish man in Hafnarfjörður last week. The attack, which took place in the parking lot of a grocery store, was recorded by one of the attackers, and police are worried that the video of this attack is being spread through social media. The person who recorded it was a 17-year-old girl who has since been released from police custody, and one of the other 3 suspects has confessed to fatally stabbing the man. Of the 3 remaining suspects, 2 of them are minors, and those 2 will be moved to an institution that is more appropriate for criminal suspects under the age of 18. All the suspects are going to be in police custody for at least the next 4 weeks. In the meantime, a fund has been started to help support the 2-year-old daughter of the victim. Now, if you live in Iceland, I've included the bank information in the description, so you can make a donation with that information. There is as yet no way to donate to this fund if you live abroad. Do you remember my previous video about the first day of summer and how it's kind of a running joke in this country? Well, the first day of summer was, I think, a week or so. Last week? Yeah, it was last week. And this week, we got hit by a lot of snow. Not just any amount of, snow in Iceland in the spring and even in the summer is not unusual, but we specifically got the most snow that Iceland has ever seen in April since 1999. And this has renewed the ever-present heated debate about studded tires. Now, like a lot of subjects in Iceland that are hotly divided, this breaks down basically between people who live in the capital area and people who live in the countryside. You see, people who live in the countryside like studded tires because country roads in the wintertime can be very icy, and studded tires can provide an extra sense of security. However, roads in the capital area are very well cleared, and so all studded tires do is contribute to the air pollution that we have. As a result of this, there's an off-season wherein if you're caught driving on studded tires in the off-season, you can get hit with a heavy fine. And other people have added to the discussion that modern winter tires don't even need studs anymore. You know, technology has caught up with ice, and we no longer need these studded tires. And this debate just goes back and forth every single spring, all of which would be moot if we had an active train system, but no. In other news, I highly recommend reading this article that was just published. I've linked to it in the description, and it is about the effects of volcanoes and how they can be deadly in many different ways. Now, when you think about the deadliness of volcanoes, yeah, there's, of course, being buried in lava, but, there's also the fact that sulfur dioxide, a deadly gas, is emitted by volcanoes. Volcanic ash can have large amounts of fluoride and even mercury, both of which, as Well, fluoride is poisonous in large quantities. Mercury is pretty poisonous pretty much in any quantity. But there's also a political aspect of volcanoes that I had never even thought about before. This article mentions a study that dug into the Laki eruption of 1780. Now, this was a devastating eruption that was felt across Europe for the ash cloud that it created. And this study contends that part of the reason, a significant part of the reason why this eruption was so deadly was because of the slow response of Denmark. Iceland was a colony of Denmark at the time. The Danish government was afraid to incur aid expenditures that might later prove unnecessary, that it proved to delay action by a year or more, and risk that aid might come too late to do any good. The effects of the Laki natural catastrophe could therefore have been significantly reduced by efficient government measures. Wow. Thanks, Denmark. So here's a neat and kind of a chilling little story. Last April 14th, a child named Rebecca Rún Alexandersdóttir was born in Akureyri. With the birth of this child, Akureyri's population is now 20,000 people. Okay, yes, so what? But what if I told you that in 1967, also on April 14th, a child was born that brought Akureyri's population to 10,000 people? Huh? I thought it was cool. Lastly, the 7 eggs that were laid by the Biko ravens are now hatching. As I said in the previous video, this raven pair have been nesting above the entrance to the home supply store Biko in Selfoss, South Iceland for at least the past 12 years now. And every spring, there's a live stream set up where you can watch them make their nest, lay their eggs, have their hatchlings, and take care of their young before they fly off. What I neglected to mention in this previous video is the names of the ravens. Their names are Hrap and Hrepna, which are literally the masculine and feminine forms of raven, respectively. Just as before, I've put a link to the live stream in the description. You should absolutely check it out. It's adorable. In any event, that's the week's top stories in Iceland. If you like the content that you see here, be sure and like and subscribe. And if you really like the content that you see here, check out the Patreon link in the description below. Which reminds me, I want to thank Corinne Vasquez, Marion Ward, Christopher Hunter, and Marion Moores for being patrons on the $20 level, Laura Johnson and Kimberly McDaniel for being patrons on the $15 level, and Stephen Ellis and Vivi Carvajal Schaffner for being patrons on the $10 level. You folks rock. That's all from me. Be good to each other.